Historically, I think it's fair to say that Iran is one of the great civilizations, one of the 5-6 greatest civilizations in the world. It has contributed enormously to the world culture, to world science, to world history. It has probably produced the first Declaration of Human Rights. It has clearly produced one of the most influential religions in the world that is not often talked about, and that's Zoroastrianism. Zoroastrianism and its ideas, whether it is the idea of heaven and hell, the idea of a Messiah, the idea of angels, all of these that are so central to Christianity, so central to Judaism, so central to Islam, essentially come from Zoroastrianism. To come to the more modern times, if you're thinking about U.S.-Iran, for example, relations, this is a complicated relationship that goes back for at least 150 years. But at that time, there were more Americans going to Iran. Iran became a subject of intense curiosity for missionaries. So missionaries began to arrive in Iran en masse. Some of the first schools for nursing, some of the first schools for girls were created by American missionaries. During that period, there are very few Iranians who have come to the United States because till World War II, the language of culture and learning in Iran is not English, it's French. After World War II, that changes. English becomes the new lingua franca. Everybody wants to learn English. Travel becomes easier. And you begin to have the first wave of Iranians coming to the United States.
In 1915, United States government brought some trees from Iran and some from Aleppo and distributed from Washington all the way to California. Kerman pistachio has a good variety to propagate. And today, all of the nuts that you eat when buying in stores called Kerman pistachio. And they came from Punjab. I am Mehdi Orandi. I was born in Rafsanjan, Iran, in a farming family who grew pistachios for a few generations. But when I grew up, I went to medical school in Tehran, University of Tehran, and got my MD. At the same time, I have two younger brothers, Mahmoud and Ahmad. They came to medical school, and all three of us got MD. And within a year or two, all three of us came to the United States. Then I lived in Minnesota and flew back and forth to grow pistachio here. Then later on, Adam, my son, came here. He's operating the plant and has grown quite a bit for the last 3-4 years.
Growing up in a small town in Minnesota, many people didn't even know what pistachios were. We were the family that had pistachios and pomegranates and things that were sort of exotic to some local small town people in the early 70s. Now, thankfully, all that stuff is not exotic anymore. It's part of the fruit on the table. I have about 100 employees, which I'm very proud of. That's something that brings me a lot of joy, to have 100 families that count on us for good pay, good benefits, health insurance, retirement. And as a result, we have some very fantastic and loyal employees that feel ownership. There's sort of pride of ownership that people share working here.
I came to America in 1961, and I was lucky enough to be admitted to Brooklyn Polytech. Fortunately, I managed to graduate. So IBM made me an offer, and I was part of a team that their job was developing semiconductor chips. It was really technologically very fascinating. When I left IBM after 17 years, I had 42 patents. I moved in 1982 to Silicon Valley, and I saw what these people were doing with what they didn't have. It was amazing. So I developed a process doing chip repair, which was revolutionary at that time because nobody would believe I could do that. I was charging $1,000 an hour. Of course, it would take only 2 hours to do it, but the amount of my machine I had spent, that time that machine was $500,000. It was a lot of money then. I sold the company. We had a revenue of about $50 million, and I had about 100 people working. I retired in 2013. And then again, I was wondering, what am I going to do? I always had been, as a pilot, was my passion. So I said, why shouldn't I start an aircraft business? So it has been a long journey, but I'm blessed. The company that bought my last company, which was called Nano ISI, they didn't have enough cash to pay me, so they gave me lots of stock. And that company last month was sold for $780 million. So that was a wonderful finale for my 50 years of life in technology.
I remember my parents used to send us in the summer to see doctors or follow doctors, and I vividly remember that they were looking with their scopes. Then they wanted me to see something, okay? One of them used to say, son, come and look at this, and say, do you see, for example, this stone in the bladder? By the time I wanted to look, his hand had moved, so I couldn't see the stone that he was referring to. So he would try 2 or 3 times. Finally, I would see. And I remember I would ask him, sir, why don't you put it on television? Then he would start laughing and he said, oh, are you an inventor now? So this went on for years until I got to medical school, and I kept asking the same question. And finally, nobody was doing it, and I decided to do it myself.
He was working with industry to design new pieces of equipment. At the same time, he was building a large body of evidence to show his physician colleagues that this, in fact, is a better way to do things. And that's another big challenge because, physicians are skeptical by nature. Tradition pushed back on him very, very hard. And fortunately for all of us, he had the fortitude to stand up to it and persevere and make sure that he continued to do what he thought was right. He was looking for a way to make things better for his patients.
Our next winner is aptly named the father of modern operative laparoscopy. Dr. Camran Nezhat is an internationally renowned surgeon and naturalized American citizen. His care for patients extends beyond the exam room and operating theater to the public arena. Along with his brothers, both renowned reproductive surgeons in their own right, Dr. Nezhat founded the EndoMarch global movement to address the urgent needs of those suffering with endometriosis throughout the world. Dr. Nezhat, for your tremendous contributions in the field of minimally invasive surgery and for your service to your patients, colleagues, and the worldwide community, the AMA is pleased to present you with the Distinguished Service Award.
Most people think about innovation as requiring genius. And it takes a wisp of genius, but it takes, more importantly, a fearlessness to follow where your genius wants you to go. The world doesn't change easily. And Camran changed the world in large part through his force of personality and persistence.
I am very, very proud to tell you that I have done approximately more than 20,000 surgeries, and thank God I have never lost a patient. I have operated on patients from 8 years old to 92 years old. I understand there is an element of luck there, but also I have been very cautious.
I left Iran in 1964. When I was 15 and a half, my founder decided to send me to the United States, where everybody wanted to get educated. I stayed till 1975, got my PhD, went back almost immediately, because again in 1975, the brain drain, if anything, was reversed. People were going back to Iran rather than looking for permanent residency here. The revolution changed all of that. The revolution, first of all, very quickly begot a massive wave of migration out of Iran, and the most coveted place to come was the United States.
The revolution happened in 1978-79, and that was right when I'd graduated from MIT, and I had a decision to make, which is to go back to Iran with a lot of uncertainty, or to stay in the US and complete another degree. So I got my MBA here at Stanford. I forget, a large number of interviews, 30, 40, 50, 60, I don't remember. I have all the rejection letters somewhere in a file, but was not able to get a job. And had a couple of degrees from MIT and a Stanford MBA. I don't think the problem was me. I think there were other issues going on. And it was very subtle. I don't want to overstate it. It was not hostile or anything like that. It was just very subtle. But that was in contrast with the support that I received from my close friends. Basically, anybody who knew me and the other Iranians was very supportive, and anybody who just thought of us as the equivalent of what they saw on TV at night was not very supportive.
You know, I had done a dissertation for my master's in petrodollar recycling, basically claiming that The economies of the Middle East were quite small, and the money they were generating from selling oil, these Middle Eastern countries, the economies couldn't absorb it. So they will be the largest investors in the world. And my dissertation was picked up and was cited on a couple of studies. I thought, oh, okay, I have some qualification. So when I was interviewing, everybody was, oh, you're so smart, we love this dissertation, but no. So I remember going home and getting all these rejection letters in the mail. I was like, what's wrong with me? And obviously I know what's wrong with me. There's nothing wrong with me. It's really what's happening with the hostage situation.
I remember back in 1974, people would say, where are you from? And I'd be, by my parents' side, and they'd say, we're from Iran, and everybody would say, oh, wow. Then in 1979, people would ask the same question, where are you from? We'd say, from Iran, and they'd say, oh. And I clearly remember as a child saying, we're the same people, why the difference? But it was because of the tense political climate in which we immigrated here back in 1979. These early experiences with what just seemed unfair, I think raised and heightened my awareness. And trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I gravitated towards law because I saw it as an opportunity to address injustices overall.
My memory of Tehran is this incredible metropolitan city, surrounded by a lot of wonderful family and a lot of love. I remember this story, this series called The Jeffersons, and the theme song was Moving On Up, and to me it became a little bit of a theme song for my life, especially after a tragic event that happened in my life, loss of my father when I was very young. My mother was a very brave woman. She was a nurse and also had studied abroad, so she decided to take on that challenge of taking my brother and I abroad early. And as we were leaving Iran, there were the inklings of the revolution starting, and the hostage crisis happened in Iran after the revolution. And this is American employees at the embassy in Iran and Tehran were taken as hostages, and this terrible relationship developed between the US that to this day I think is obviously cause of a lot of tension. As much as that tension was palpable, I was very optimistic in just pursuing my education.
Berkeley embraced people like me who were new to this country, new to this environment. During the periods at Berkeley, I think there were moments that the insights of the future essentially came. The whole notion of abstraction and abstract thinking, understanding systems, society. I was fortunate enough to be in an environment where all of those concepts, they came to a point of realization. And those things were all inspiring, that how can you participate? I wanted to pursue my master's degree. I studied applied mathematics and computer science. I wanted to pursue that. But before I knew it, I had more people knocking at my door wanting to give me a job. Through friends, I got exposed to Oracle. I joined Oracle. I was in my early 30s. I had just got married. I just had two beautiful twin boys, and everybody thought I'm crazy leaving a very big job at Oracle with a lot of cushion and financial benefits to start my own company, and I did. And the name of the company was Saba. I ended up taking that company public 3 years later. I didn't really think about how everything could fail. I thought, the only thing I thought about is if I don't execute on it today, I would never gonna do it. So I've been around entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship for a very long time. And now I had an opportunity to use my own wealth to be in the business of financing other entrepreneurs.
A professor of mine from Stanford Business School had started one of the early private equity firms in real estate. So I did that for about 2.5 years. Then in mid-1983, I left that organization together with a colleague, and we started what became AMB and now Prologis. We decided to form our first fund, which was a $100 million fund in 1988. This is 5 years into the business. And we were about to go into one of the downturns caused by the savings and loan crisis in the US. At that period of time, we used the capital that we had just raised to buy very ordinary pedestrian properties, warehouses and neighborhood shopping centers. And then the rest of the real estate world collapsed around us. So we emerged from this sort of 1991 debacle in real estate as being the only sort of one of the few standing firms that had a good track record.
So I remember one of my last interviews was with a bank which is now part of JP Morgan. He said, I'm not supposed to tell you this, but you're hired. And I'm like, oh wow, this is my only break. It was my only job offer. And that's how I fell into Wall Street. After a year and a half, the investment bank basically stole me away from the trading desk and said, we want you to work in the oil and gas group. So I found a way to finance a lot of these oil projects through the bond market. So the first asset-backed deal in the bond market for oil was my deal.
When I first came into the office, I came in as a volunteer. There were 7 of us, 6 men and me. And I was a volunteer. They were all employees at the time. 2.5 months into my 3-month stint, I was sworn in as a deputy district attorney in Santa Clara County. And then on October 30th, 2017, I received the call that the governor has decided to appoint me to the Superior Court of the state of California, County of Santa Clara. This is all I've done my entire career, 22 years and 9 months. I've been a deputy DA, and now I'm transitioning into my new role as a judge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America.
I'm honored and grateful to add my name to the illustrious list of judges in Santa Clara County. I will work hard to make sure that I'm worthy of the enormous responsibility entrusted in me. Thank you. Nobody in our county has ever been appointed to be a Superior Court judge, and I hope to inspire not only other Iranian Americans, but other attorneys from various backgrounds to know that they can take it to the next level of their career through their hard work and their determination and their reputation, because ultimately your reputation is everything.
I pursued a degree in electroengineering. I wanted to work at NASA. I found my way to get an internship there and had several amazing experiences working at NASA. And all of those, again, were wonderful experiences that just gave me a lot of confidence, about application of what I was learning, about the fact that this kid in Iran with a dream of being an astronaut can actually work at NASA a couple of years later. So I joined 2 startups. Company called Go Corporation, worked at this company 3DO, which was a technology gaming company. Those companies did not work out, but as is typical of the Valley story here, they become this incredible experience for you to teach you about failure, to teach you about risk-taking. But what's even more important is the people you're surrounded with. Those same people end up in different companies and eventually, potentially with you, and that was my story. These 2 companies that didn't work out later on became these guiding lights and mentors and friends and employees. And I went to this company called Netscape, which was the start of the internet revolution. Netscape became really, for me, the training ground, which ultimately led to my experiences at Google.
So in in 1996, we came up with this idea that was really a first in our industry, which is to take all our funds, combine them together, and then combine them with our GP and take the whole thing public. We raised $450 million in the offering, which in those days, in 1997, was a really big deal. By 2010, we saw an opportunity to do a deal with our primary competitor, which is Prologis. And we engineered a merger between AMB and Prologis. And that created a company that at that time had $43 billion of assets. It was actually the largest M&A deal ever done in real estate. Today, we have $81 billion of assets. It is one of the largest, if not the largest, real estate company in the country. We are actually in the middle of a deal to buy one of our competitors for about $8.5 billion. Today, my job is mostly about people. It's about assessing people, about making sure people are motivated and pumped up about the business. Because my philosophy is that if you have really happy, engaged people, they will take care of the customer. So a lot of businesses say the customer is number one. I don't think the customer is number one. I think our people are the number one, because if you have pissed off people, no matter how good your customer relationships are, they're not going to get that kind of service. So take care of your people, they'll take care of the customers, and if you have happy customers, your shareholders, by definition, will be happy.
I remember being called to London. I was like, oh, what's going on here? The guy said, we want you to head up our electronics group. And I'm like, what happened to oil and gas? And he said, we need help. I was a go-to person when things got bad. And you know, Afsaneh knows how to unwind hairy deals. One of the best stories was Larry Ellison, CEO of Oracle. The growth of the company was so vast. The infrastructure was not there for checks and balances. And all of a sudden they had a big cash problem. Michael Dell had overbought memory chips. Todd McNeely, Michael Dell, I met Bill Gates a couple of times. It was like I never knew they will become who they became. I feel like I was there at the foundation of how this industry was born. By this time, I was a very experienced banker. I had done a lot of M&A. I had raised about $12 billion of capital. And I said, you know what? Healthcare is the next thing. It's 18% of our economy. It's still very sick, but it's getting better. Technology is having a huge impact. So it's a very fulfilling, rewarding experience.
I grew up from the age of 7 in South San Jose around the orchards that really became the epicenter of what we now know as Silicon Valley. So seeing that crystallize around me, I was drawn toward the pioneering spirit of the area, toward the optimism, toward the growth, and I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something where I could serve as an advocate or as an ambassador for a cause that I really believed in. Soon after I completed my Stanford education, I learned about the senior care industry. I learned about aging services and how it was at that time a $30 billion industry that was highly fragmented. What I thought would be a 1 to 2 year venture where I could help to build a company in this space ended up being this 13-year journey that has led from a bootstrap startup to a venture-backed growth company to now an industry leader in the private pay services space. We're the largest provider of in-home care for seniors across the country. Outside of the company, I also try to flourish personally by being involved in a number of different ventures. And so something that I always share is figure out those intersections across the things that you're involved with so that it doesn't feel like you're actually living 10 independent lives. You're bringing them in together into one really meaningful life.
Larry and Sergey had just left Stanford. They had gone into a garage and they had just found their first office on University Avenue. It was this incredible fit where I was looking for being at that stage of a company, and they were looking for someone that is a business leader that they could entrust. joining this startup with my mentality of a technologist, not just a business leader. So I had that combination. What I promised myself when I entered Google is that I'm going to focus on building a company to last, and I want a business model that lasts. So that mentality is really what helped us build products that really worked and respected the experience of the user. As challenging as the environment as Google continues to be, I've been there, done that, and that I wanted something new, and for me, it was a real honor to get this call to join Jack as he had come back as an interim CEO. It's a company that's about, in some ways, about humanity, and humanity talking and trying to learn by having a conversation. And how do you continue to have a set of values that you uphold and make it a healthy environment that people can participate?
Since like 11, 12 years old, I was in love with the girl in Iran. So I came here, I remember I had $700 cash and I didn't speak any word English. I didn't know what to do. And the first thing I decided to do is just make sure I don't lose that girl. So I said, okay, I have to call her every day. I had a bag of quarter every morning going over there calling Iran. And at that time it was like $5 per minute. So I lost that $700 like a few weeks. So that $700 is gone. So I needed to find a job, and I saw an advertising that said Medallion Rug Gallery in downtown Palo Alto hire salespeople, and I thought, wow, then maybe I should try. You typically don't sell carpets at the gallery. Go to people's home. Once you go to people's home, you start to spend a couple of hours. You get to know them. Their kids come and play with you, and you really get to know them. So this is around late 90s, 98, 99. I just felt that all of my customers are in tech. I was asking, what do you do? They're either CEO, venture capitalists, lawyers, bankers. In my mind, businesses were just making things, but for them was knowledge-based companies, and I was in awe, and I said, okay, maybe this is the most important street and it's the most important time of my life, and I have to take this opportunity. I want to be part of this community. I started this firm with my partner, Hershenson, who's in that room. We know each other for 17 years. She's from Barcelona, like me, immigrant. We actually kind of yin and yang. You know, I'm a college dropout. She's a Stanford PhD. She has 28 patents. I have 0 patents. So I invested in 150 startups before this fund. She invested in 1. But we have many things in common. The first thing is like being good to people, helping others, and very complementary skills.
Well, I think I met him through my husband. He was an investor in Danger. Later, that turned into Android. Nobody would give him money because they were making a cell phone. And in '99, people were like, why do you need a smartphone? But one day he came home after 6 months of raising money and being completely unsuccessful and said, oh, I found some money. And I said, who gave you money? He's like, this guy in a rug store. I said, it must be crime money. You must return it. That's how I met Pejman.
So I'm going to walk you through downtown Palo Alto. This is where many of the category-defining tech giants started. David Philo and Jerry Yang were students at Stanford University, and then they started Yahoo at this place. If you look at that building upstairs, that's the first Facebook office. This is 165 University Avenue. Google started here, PayPal started here, and Logitech and Danger. So it's amazing that how much karma this building had. So this is now Medallion Rug Gallery. This is the place I used to put a lot of parties. Like when I mentioned I brought Sequoia Capital at 150 Iranians, was just around here. So it was really unheard of to bring tech inside a carpet gallery, but I wasn't really afraid of it. I just love to bring people together.
When I think about what brought my parents to this country, it's really the same thing that brings so many people here. It was a desire to access the tremendous educational and economic opportunities here. It was the culture of openness and tolerance and freedom that this country has. And it was the knowledge that when they would start a family, that their children, which it just turned out to be me, that their child would have every opportunity available in the world. And that turned out to be a wonderful decision, not only for them, but for me, because shortly after I was born, I was diagnosed with a rare childhood eye cancer that took my eyesight at age 8 years old. There were often times when I would be excluded from certain activities because people wouldn't necessarily believe that a kid who was blind would be able to do the same things that another kid could do. Thankfully, I had parents who really believed in me, and not only believed in me, but were willing to fight for my inclusion. And there were also some teachers who really believed strongly that I could do anything I set my mind to. I was at Columbia, I was studying Middle Eastern languages and cultures, and that happened to be when 9/11 happened in New York City. Living in New York as a Middle Eastern American in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 really did show the degree to which it's important for us to educate people about our rich and tolerant and diverse Middle Eastern cultures. I went on to win a Rhodes Scholarship and go to Oxford and study post-colonial literature. Ultimately, I decided I wanted to come back to the United States and study law. You know, I'm very inspired by my mom, who was an attorney and now is a Superior Court judge here in Washington State. And 3 years after moving back, I decided to throw my hat in the ring and run for state representative. So I was successful in that campaign. I served in the State House of Representatives for 1 term, and then there was a vacancy in the State Senate. Again, with a lot of support, I was successful in that race and decided that I was going to run to become the next lieutenant governor. That race challenged me in new ways because there was a lot of anxiety by some people about whether someone who's Middle Eastern American could run and win. That was compounded by concerns about whether someone who's blind could run a campaign like this or even serve as lieutenant governor. And so those were challenges that we had to overcome during the campaign to really explain to people my story. I've been very fortunate to serve as a lieutenant governor for these past couple years. In that role, I've been able to create programs and advocate for policies that expand opportunities in our state. While it's important that we emphasize education in science, technology, engineering, and math, I really hope that we continue to emphasize and in fact increase our emphasis on the arts, because it's through imagination that we're going to solve our greatest challenges.
I was 14 years old and the war between Iran and Iraq had just ended, and lots of movies came out, like Iranian movies in theaters, and I remember one of them that really deeply impacted me was Hamoon by Dariush Mehjoui. At that point, I was just like, this is it, I want to be a filmmaker. I started with like an 8mm film that was like an action film. It was kind of based on inspirations from Pulp Fiction. And then I made my first documentary film. It's about Lalezar Street. Lalezar was the first street that actually represented the Western culture, you know, theaters, movies, music, cafes. And then right after that, I left Iran. I moved to this collective house like 10 years ago. After I moved in, I learned about collective living and cooperative living and agriculture, composting, you know, gardening. And all of that was just so appealing to me, you know. I really wanted to dive into that culture and learn more about it and be part of it. In 2019, I was commissioned by the city of Oakland to work as a cultural strategist, to inspire people to create loving homes in multicultural and multi-generational environments.
We are so pleased to have Sabereh Kashi, a filmmaker who's working on her own incredible documentary about her journey of immigrating from her native Iran to Oakland. Sabereh has gotten us to go from talking about codes and permits and units to home, shared culture, shared space.
There was definitely the sense of being very different than everyone else. Seeing my parents have to adjust and to assimilate, and myself just, looking different and also speaking a different language, eating different foods when I'm going home, the smell of chai, the smell of sabzi. As much as I absolutely loved going home and returning to that, I knew that there was a very big difference between my life inside my home and outside my home. Art was a way for me to voice my opinions, voice my experiences. I still was terrified of being an artist. I thought maybe I could be a commercial artist, a graphic designer, for example. But I kept finding myself wanting to paint and wanting to draw. It's not easy to put yourself out there in these ideas because who cares? Who wants to listen to you? But when you're true to yourself and true to what it is that you love, you'll start to find people making connections to your work.
So I was actually born the year that Iran and Iraq war started. But my childhood was very happy and good because we had very tight family, a lot of gatherings and very strong community. Eventually I did computer engineering. I got admission from several schools in US and Canada, and I decided to come to Stanford while it was one of the most challenging ones because getting a US visa by itself is very difficult. Most people couldn't get it. Iranian students come here with a single entry visa. It means they cannot go back. Suddenly they don't see their families 7, 8 years. So it was my, I believe, second week at Stanford that I met this researcher, Mostafa Ronaghi. He told me about the future of biology and life sciences and how it is important that we bring computer science and engineering discipline to make sense out of biology.
My interest in genetics had started actually in Iran. Back then, I learned a lot of new technologies on how to implement new techniques to look at microbes. So we came up with a new technology called pyrosequencing. The previous technology, that was the Nobel Prize winning technology, could not read more than 96 strands of DNA simultaneously. But the technology evolved so that we could read millions and billions of DNA strands simultaneously. Within 3 years after start, we went public in Stockholm Stock Exchange. After joining Stanford, I started working directly with departments outside of biology. After a few years, we dropped the time of doing one genome sequencing from years to a single day. And we basically managed to drop the price below $1,000. That technology became the foundation of how we can scale the sequencing of DNA.
It was fascinating. I walked out of that meeting, I was soulless. That is what I want to do for my career here. That's what I want to research on. So the idea emerged that what if I start a company that can bring that type of talent and technology to the field of genomics?
And we built a software to help the researchers analyze and manage genomic information easier. United States Veteran Affairs, the government also became our customer. We worked with them in the context of Million Veteran Genome Project, in which they want to look at the genomes of the veteran population because there are certain diseases that are more prevalent in that community. We decided to sell our company to a very big biopharma. Roche wanted to really get into this domain, build a personalized medicine portfolio around data science and software. I was, of course, I'm still very fascinated by the technology and working on problems in the healthcare. But I started to realize other issues that is happening in society. I'm now spending a lot of my time with entrepreneurs who are solving these social issues and creating more social mobility and equality and more just society for everyone through the means of entrepreneurship and building really scalable, impactful businesses.
I think one can say with some certainty, Iran is one of the most successful diasporas, not just financially, but also scientifically, in terms of scholarship, in terms of the legal profession, in terms of contributing to the American society. In some of the most important companies that are the driving force of the digital age, Persians have the absolute indispensable role in it. We just lost one of the probably most brilliant mathematicians in history. Maryam Mirzakhani is the first woman to win the Nobel in mathematics. And the list goes on, the number of people who have made enormous contributions.
One thing that both I love about working with immigrants and I love working with young people is that they have a fresh perspective. They weren't born in the US, and so there is no, this is just the way it is. They don't know the way it is, but they certainly do know the way it should be. And so they can say, I'm not going to take no for an answer. I'm not going to take federal law as an answer. I know that there are other ways to go about making change. I'm not going to be discouraged by the travel ban because I'm going to go vote in November. I'm not going to be discouraged because I'm going to go to this protest. I'm not going to be discouraged because I'm going to go to law school and then become, a Supreme Court justice one day and change these policies. I think this fresh perspective of actually it can be better is something that has come from immigrant communities largely and is really special about our community.
The people you're stopping from coming to the US are the people that benefit you every day and that help contribute to the community that you enjoy. We bring you good food, we help make technology that you like, we're your friends, we're your neighbors. People coming from colleges and universities, they're here to be a part of something bigger and they want to help and they love you guys more than you think they do. So if we could feel that back and if we could tell people that, I think we could do a lot with it.
I see the next generation of Iranian American being so much more successful than the previous generation, mostly because the previous generation really didn't have that many mentors, but the new generation can really leverage the experience of the previous generation to make sure that they accomplish a lot more in this country. And I'm sure because of the help that they've received from the previous generation, they're so much more receptive or susceptible to paying it forward. I've helped a couple hundred people just because I've been helped by a few. And if even 10% of those people that I've helped do the same thing, imagine the effect of that in the society.
Iranian Americans are in a unique position because their countries have been adversaries for 40 years. And so we are, I believe in a way, we're torn. We're torn on who we are. My answer, at least my perspective, is I'm Iranian American. I'm proud of my heritage and I embrace my new country, my new home as an American. And I can't say that I'm either or, I'm both.
We all belong, and I think it's that all, the quote-unquote all, is what makes this country what it is. And I hope it never loses its DNA.
At Illumina, I have a group of a couple of hundred people doing research, and they have come from 40 plus different nations. So it's amazing when you think about it. They have completely different perspective on how we should look at the data. It's fantastic for us to have that diversity, and that's why US has an edge to other countries.
I think we have to look that this social experiment of the United States of America was about immigration from the very beginning across everyone who's here, except for a very small native population. And so this is a story that we should all feel connected to.
I always had that mentality that I'm a citizen of this planet, and that I have a set of dreams, and I want to be in an environment where those dreams could be pursued. And what's incredible about this country, United States, is that even in today's tense environment, the institutions of this country protect that and create a balance of power that allows us to pursue that dream.
Being able to live next to each other with all the differences we have in our background and history, it's actually it's an example of how the world should be. So many immigrants come and contribute to this society, bring so much value, and helping American economy grow, but at the same time, the children of ours will learn from other cultures, from other backgrounds, music, art, food, and I think Silicon Valley is a great example of it.
Every one of these immigrants have contributed to the society we live today. What's really important and common across all of them is the fact that we were embraced in an open society. So I am a big believer that we as immigrants should allow for other immigrants to have the same chance as we do.
I would say immigration is what has allowed America to be successful. Why? Because we never stagnate. We always bring new people and with them new ideas. You look at the staggering percentage of new companies, Fortune 500 companies that were founded by immigrants. And you look at the top faculty at our most prestigious universities and leaders in research, in entertainment, in the arts and the sciences. You look at the communities in this country that are flourishing economically, that are thriving culturally, and those happen to be the cities and states that have been the most welcoming to immigrants. Those that are tolerant, those that are open-minded, those that extend a welcoming hand, those are the ones that are rewarded with the tremendous fruit of that tolerance. I do believe my story is a fundamentally American story. It's a story of an immigrant family that dreamt of a better future and that came to this country where countless millions of people from around the world have found that better future for themselves. And so I think about how many future Cyruses there are out there